The forest was not silent. It pulsed beneath the weight of ancient ferns and steaming air. Something moved, deliberate, vast, and patient. The ground trembled as if remembering a time when oxygen was a weapon and predators wore armor of chitin. Every shadow looked alive. Every whisper of leaf or drip of dew hinted at the presence of something older than fear itself. Before the age of dinosaurs, before mammals dared to blink beneath the canopy, the world belonged to the invertebrates, and among them, one creature ruled with silent authority, a hunter so enormous it could swallow a small amphibian whole, so perfectly designed that even extinction seemed undeserved. We often imagine spiders as small, as something to brush away, to crush under a shoe. But the truth hides in the carbon-laden swamps of the Carboniferous period, where air thick with oxygen gave birth to monsters. Here, spiders were not fragile things. They were rulers. They were architects of terror. And the largest of them, Megarachne servinei, blurred the line between nightmare and nature's brilliance. Its eyes reflected the ancient sun through the murk. Its fangs glistened with primal hunger, and every movement told the story of an earth untamed, where legs spanned half a meter, and silence was the most dangerous sound of all. If you can feel the faint crawling sensation on your skin, it's because somewhere deep in your ancestral memory, your body remembers them, the ones who came before, the ones who ruled when the air itself was poison and the night never ended. Before we step into that lost world, where every breath was a gamble and every shadow a hunter, take a moment to breathe, because what you're about to see is not fantasy, it's history, a chapter of life written in silk, bone, and time. If stories like these grip you the way fear grips the dark, make sure you're part of this journey. Subscribe, stay close, and don't look away. The spiders are waiting. Before life reached the sea's edges and the forests learned to breathe, the atmosphere itself turned strange. The Carboniferous world was a pressure chamber, swollen with oxygen so thick that a single spark could have set the sky ablaze. In this world, insects grew to the size of birds, and spiders, if we dare still call them that, became creatures of legend. This first chapter breathes life into that forgotten atmosphere, tracing the chemistry of evolution's boldest experiment, a planet that supercharged its smallest inhabitants into titans. Through vivid swamps and colossal fungi, we'll witness how oxygen rewrote the rules of survival and gave birth to giants unlike anything that has crawled since. Beneath the black water of what is now Argentina, the apex of arachnid evolution stirred. Megarachne servinei, a spider the size of a dinner plate, or perhaps larger, hunted not from webs but from shadows. This chapter descends into the slow-motion horror of its world. Armored amphibians croaking in vain, dragonflies with wings like daggers, and a spider whose bite needed no venom to kill. We'll reconstruct the anatomy of this predator, feel the tension of its hunts, and uncover the fossil that first revealed its existence, a discovery that blurred the line between science and nightmare. As the world changed, so did the balance of terror. Giant millipedes longer than men roamed the swamps, and the first vertebrate hunters emerged from the mire, but even they learned fear. This chapter explores the arms race between fang and flesh, air and water, predator and prey. It's a chronicle of nature's cold logic, where evolution favored silence, patience, and ambush. Here, we'll meet the other titans of the Carboniferous, Arthropods, Pulmonoscorpius, and the first great amphibians, all sharing a kingdom that pulsed to the rhythm of decay. No empire lasts forever. Not even the empire of air-breathing monsters. As oxygen fell and the earth shifted, the giants began to suffocate. What had once been their strength became their curse. This chapter dives into their slow, tragic extinction, a biological unraveling that mirrors the fall of civilizations yet to come. Through ash, storms, and time's merciless erosion, we'll trace how the age of spiders faded into myth, leaving behind only stone imprints and evolutionary echoes in modern species. Extinction does not erase memory, it transforms it. The final chapter steps beyond science, into the haunting echo of what still lingers. Spiders remain among us, smaller now, yet carrying the same primal intelligence in their web designs, their patience, their precision. But what if the genetic memory of the giants never truly died? What if deep beneath the jungles, or in the black oceans where light cannot trespass, a descendant of Megarachne still weaves its quiet empire? The question remains unanswered, and perhaps it should. The Earth was a cauldron, humid, feverish, and green beyond reason. The Carboniferous world, some 300 million years ago, did not resemble the planet we know. It was an alien Eden, wrapped in heat and silence, where the air shimmered with moisture and the sky hung heavy with invisible fire. Trees rose like cathedrals, their trunks armored in bark thicker than steel, their leaves dripping with resin and shadow. Beneath them, the ground steamed, a labyrinth of decaying vegetation, fungal towers and roots that slithered through black soil as though alive. There was no birdsong, no mammalian cry, only the wet breathing of the earth itself and the quiet hiss of evolution experimenting in the dark. In this suffocating paradise, something extraordinary had happened. The planet's atmosphere had changed, a silent rebellion in the chemistry of life. Oxygen flooded the world, rising to nearly 35% concentration, almost double today's levels. Every breath was fuel, every cell burned brighter, and with that surplus came monsters. Insects, liberated from the usual constraints of air and size, began to grow, not just bigger, but colossal. Dragonflies the size of hawks hovered over stagnant pools, their wings slicing through the thick air with the sound of silk tearing. Millipedes stretched across the forest floor like trains of armor, gliding through the undergrowth with the patience of glaciers. And somewhere in that breathing, living fog, spiders, the architects of patience and death, found their throne. They were not yet the delicate, fragile weavers we know today. They were creatures of flesh and pressure, built from the raw excess of oxygen and ambition. Every joint gleamed with moisture, every hair on their bodies sensitive to the pulse of life around them. Their lungs, book lungs, layered and intricate, drank in the supercharged air, turning breath into weapon. Evolution had found a loophole, and the result was terrifying beauty. Imagine standing in that forest. The air is hot, almost wet enough to drown in. The ground gives way beneath your feet with a sound like tearing skin. You can't see more than a few meters ahead. The mist hides everything, and then, from the stillness, you hear it. A faint click, soft but deliberate, then another. It's not the sound of footsteps. It's the sound of something waiting, adjusting its stance, feeling for tremors through the earth. The forest holds its breath. The world feels conscious, aware of your intrusion, and suddenly, you understand what it means to be prey. The Carboniferous was not just a time of growth, it was a time of escalation. Every species adapted to abundance by becoming more dangerous. The simplest creatures developed armor, speed, or venom. The amphibians that crawled from the water to feed on insects soon faced hunters far stranger than they could imagine. For the first time in Earth's history, the power dynamic tilted toward invertebrates. Evolution's usual script, vertebrate dominance, slow complexity, was momentarily forgotten. Here, in this steamy epoch, the soft-bodied ruled. The exoskeleton of this kingdom. Beneath layers of peat and shadow, dead vegetation stacked higher than cities. Each fallen tree, each rotting fern became a stage for 1,000 unseen dramas. Tiny mites fed on fungi. Fungi dissolved wood. Insects devoured fungi. Spiders devoured insects. Life and death were indistinguishable, a single continuous cycle breathing in unison. The forest floor shimmered with threads of silk that caught the dim light like veins of glass. Snares woven between roots, across moss, under the massive fronds of horsetails. Each one belonged to a hunter unseen, its patience older than mammals, its hunger older than teeth. There was poetry in the balance, until it began to tip. The atmosphere that birthed these titans also cursed them. The air, so rich with oxygen, was volatile. Lightning storms were infernos waiting to happen. The slightest spark could turn the sky into fire. The same breath that empowered life could annihilate it. It was a world in constant attention, a planet caught between creation and combustion. Yet, the spiders thrived. They adapted not just to survive, but to dominate. Their bodies grew denser, more efficient. Some hunted openly on the forest floor, their legs spreading wide as branches, their eyes glinting with eightfold intelligence. Others became ambushers, burying themselves in the peat, waiting for vibrations, the faint trembling rhythm of something alive above. They didn't need to see. The world spoke to them through the ground. A dragonfly landing nearby, a beetle scuttling over a decaying fern. To a spider, these were symphonies, and in that instant, motion ceased. Then a blur, swift, silent, fatal. The forest consumed itself, one heartbeat at a time. What's haunting about that era is not just the scale, but the quiet. No roars, no screams, only the subtle clicks of jaws and the wisp air of silk stretching in the damp air. If you stood long enough, you'd start to feel that rhythm inside your own chest. Nature's oldest heartbeat, patient, methodical, and merciless. But every paradise carries its expiration. Even as the spiders reached their zenith, the world was already shifting. Continents drifted, the atmosphere wavered, the lush abundance began to decay under its own weight. The air thickened not just with oxygen, but with the gases of decomposition, and in the darkness of the swamps, something else was stirring, an arachnid unlike any that came before, one that would leave its fossilized ghost for us to find hundreds of millions of years later. Its name was Megarachne servinei, the first and last of its kind, the perfect predator of a doomed empire. The air grows colder, the forest begins to fade, the whispers of silk turn to echoes in stone, and as we follow that fading trail from peat to fossil, from memory to discovery, the question emerges: how much of this ancient predator still lives within the spiders that crawl our walls today? The answer lies in the fossil beds of Argentina, where the remains of this nightmare were uncovered by accident, misidentified, and then revealed as something far more haunting than science had prepared for. It began, as many great revelations do, with a mistake. In 1980, paleontologist Mario Huniken unearthed a fossil from the black shale of San Luis, Argentina, a creature so alien, so exquisitely detailed, that even under the microscope it seemed to hum with power. What Huniken saw embedded in that ancient rock was a monster with armored plates, menacing fangs, and an abdomen like the hull of a submarine. He gave it a name whispered now with awe: Megarachne servinei, the largest spider that ever lived, the forgotten lord of the Carboniferous swamps. For years, the world believed it. Textbooks printed its silhouette, 8 legs sprawling across pages like an omen. Artists painted scenes of it hunting amphibians in black water, its reflection trembling beneath bioluminescent ferns. Children shuddered at museum displays that described it as a creature the size of a dinner plate, capable of ambushing prey larger than itself. The myth was born, and it spread, feeding the world's quiet fear of spiders with something tangible, something prehistoric. But myths, like fossils, can erode under scrutiny. Long after its discovery, scientists began to suspect something was off. The carapace, though broad, was too rigid. The eye socket seemed misplaced, and the so-called fangs looked more like the pincers of an aquatic creature. After years of debate, a second fossil surfaced, better preserved, more complete. When it was examined, the illusion crumbled. Megarachne servinei was not a spider at all. It was a eurypterid, a sea scorpion, an ancient relative of arachnids, yes, but a swimmer, not a weaver, the greatest spider that never was. Yet even after the truth emerged, the legend refused to die, because beneath the layers of misidentification, there remained a deeper truth, that spiders did once grow to monstrous size, that the Carboniferous world truly was ruled by predators, or so silent and efficient they could rival any apex hunter of later ages. And perhaps Megarachne, whether spider or not, captured the essence of what evolution was striving toward in that age of oxygen: precision, patience, perfection. Imagine it now, as it might have been, suspended between science and myth. A creature half dream, half record, the air still thick with mist, the water black, calm as glass, then a ripple, a flicker of movement just beneath the surface. You can't tell if it's swimming or crawling, but it moves with intent. Its body gleams with wet armor, its limbs stretch outward like blades. fades. It pauses, sensing vibrations through the water, its flattened body reflecting the faint green glow of bioluminescent algae. Then, without a sound, it strikes, a blur of motion, a flash of legs, the crushing force of appendages snapping shut around its prey. Silence returns. The swamp absorbs the true face of Megarachne, a hybrid of land and water, of myth and memory. In that sense, it belongs more to the imagination than to taxonomy, but its presence in those ancient wetlands, real or symbolic, speaks to something larger, a time when evolution blurred the line between terror and adaptation. When predators didn't roar, they waited. For the creatures of that age, survival was a gamble written in milliseconds. Amphibians that crawled too close to the shallows vanished in ripples. Dragonflies that dipped to drink were seized mid-air by creatures that didn't yet need venom to kill. The world belonged to ambushers, to the patient, to those who could outlast sound itself. There's a peculiar intimacy in imagining Megarachne alive, its movement deliberate, almost regal. In the dim light of the Carboniferous dusk, it would have seemed eternal, its every step measured, its every pause purposeful. It didn't need webs or traps. Its power lay in the inevitability of motion, the quiet certainty that once it moved, something else ceased to. And yet even the rulers of that world had predators of their own. The amphibians grew larger, developing armored hides and sharper senses. The first primitive reptiles began to appear, small, quick, curious things that scuttled through the undergrowth. The balance was shifting again. For every adaptation nature made, it offered a counter. For every hunter, a challenger. Evolution was not a straight line. It was a circle of hunger and invention, endlessly turning. Still, for a time, the great arachnids held their ground. They were architects of stillness, reflections of the world's own patience. Each breath of mist that curled through the swamps seemed to carry their essence. Each trembling web in the dark hinted at their unseen dominion. And somewhere in that tension, between myth and biology, a question took root, one that scientists still wrestle with in hushed tones. Could something so perfectly adapted to stillness, so masterfully silent, ever truly vanish? Because here is the truth. Megarachne's misidentification did not erase the possibility of other giants. Fossils are chance, not census. We know what the Earth was willing to preserve, not what it has chosen to hide. There are entire ecosystems lost to erosion, entire species swallowed by time. Perhaps somewhere in the pages of that buried story, another predator waits, one with the body of a spider, the patience of stone, and the memory of an empire that once breathed pure fire. For now, all we have is the silence, the weight of black rock, and the echo of something immense. The fossil rests, still embedded in shale, its surface smooth and cool to the touch, but beneath it, trapped forever, is a story of dominance, deception, and transformation, the rise of a legend, and the first hint of its inevitable fall. The forest trembles again, the air begins to thin, the empire of breath that fed the giants starts to fade. Oxygen wanes, skies darken, and the first signs of collapse begin to stir in the swamps that once teemed with endless life. The age of monsters is beginning to choke on its own brilliance, and as the great predators descend into extinction's shadow, new hunters begin to rise with teeth, bones, and lungs. By the time the sun began to pale through the canopy of ancient ferns, the empire of invertebrates had reached its trembling peak. The swamps that once echoed with the quiet dominion of arachnids now thrummed with new voices, the deep, wet croaks of amphibians, the shuffle of armored fish dragging themselves onto land, the whisper of evolution rewriting the script once more. The world was no longer ruled by the soft and the silent. Flesh and bone were arriving, and with them came hunger sharpened into new forms. Yet the spiders and their kin did not yield easily. They watched, hidden in the green shadows of decay, adapting in ways that only the patient could understand. The forests of the late Carboniferous were labyrinths of tension. The air remained thick, sweet with decomposition and the faint sting of sulfur. Gigantic trees stretched toward the fading light, their roots gripping the swampland like claws. Each fallen log was a world in miniature, mosses, fungi, and tiny predators carving their empires in the damp wood. Here, beneath the perpetual twilight, Arthropods moved, a millipede longer than a man, its body gliding with unnatural grace, its armor plates clattering like bones underfoot. It was a living bridge between eras, a remnant of a time when oxygen blessed every creature with impossible size, and yet, for all its scale, even Arthropods knew fear, because the spiders were still here, smaller now but no less lethal. Some had adapted to hunt from the canopy, weaving trap lines across the narrow gaps between trees. Others had turned to ambush, lurking beneath rotting bark or inside hollow roots, their legs twitching with restless precision. They had learned to move with the stillness of death, to sense life by vibration alone. To a passing amphibian, the ground itself was the trap. One tremor too many, one misplaced step, and fangs found flesh before or thought could form. This was nature's cold arithmetic. Every creature that evolved strength did so at the cost of vulnerability somewhere else. The amphibians, bold in their new lungs and limbs, ventured onto land only to find it already claimed by predators that did not breathe but waited. And those that survived learned to listen, to read the silence, to recognize when the swamp's chorus of insects fell quiet, because when the forest held its breath, it meant the spiders were near. But a shift was coming, subtle at first, then violent. The balance of terror that had defined the Carboniferous was beginning to tilt. The oxygen that once fed abundance began to wane, slowly, almost imperceptibly. The atmosphere thinned, the fires burned less fiercely. The giants began to suffocate in the very air that had made them gods. The great arthropods, millipedes, dragonflies, and perhaps even Megarachne's kin found themselves shrinking, gasping for breath in a world that was no longer theirs. For the first time in 100 million years, size became a curse. Still, life is nothing if not inventive in its cruelty. The predators that emerged from the mire were different. Vertebrates, cold-blooded, calculating. Some bore teeth shaped for slicing, others for crushing. Their bodies were small but efficient, powered by lungs that could function in the thinning air, and as they spread across the dying swamps, they became the new architects of fear. The spiders, stripped of dominance, turned inward, toward stealth, venom, and the elegance of adaptation. No longer could they rely on size, they would rely on precision. Amphibians croaking in the shallows, the air electric with decay, the trees glistening from endless rain, and then from the undergrowth, the faint sound of silk stretching, a strand, near invisible, vibrating with anticipation. The hunter waits. Its eyes reflect the dying light, 8 gleaming points in the dark. It is smaller now, perhaps no larger than your hand, but inside it, evolution is coiling tighter, perfecting its craft. When the prey stumbles close, the strike is instantaneous. Venom floods tissue, paralyzing muscle before pain can register. The victim twitches once, twice, and falls still. That, right there, was the birth of strategy. Where the giants relied on brute force, their descendants learned the art of design, web architecture, sensory mastery, biochemical warfare. Evolution had taken something colossal and distilled it into something almost divine. And yet, in this dark perfection, there was tragedy. Each giant that perished left behind an echo, a genetic whisper carried forward through millennia. The lineage of the great arachnids fractured, diversified, splintered across time. Scorpions, mites, and spiders each inherited a fragment of their ancestors' might, but never the totality. The age of colossal spiders was gone. The age of intricate killers had begun. Among the ferns, a predator waits for prey that will never come. The air no longer hums with the same energy. The amphibians have grown bolder, climbing onto land and into history. The forest floor dries. The peat turns to dust. What was once a cradle becomes a grave. But beneath the sediment, beneath the crushed leaves and shattered carapaces, the story remains written in the bones of stone. Fossils capture what memory cannot: the shimmer of armor, the curve of a fang, the silence that follows a kill. In those impressions we see the tension of two worlds colliding, the rule of silk giving way to the reign of bone. And yet evolution has no sentimentality. The earth turned, the air cooled, and with every passing millennium, the great hunters of the swamps were reduced to relics. But their influence endured. Even now, every spider that spins a web, every scorpion that raises its tail, every silk thread that trembles in moonlight, All are echoes of the Carboniferous titans. Nature never forgets her masterpieces. She only refines them. As the last of the great arthropods vanished into the fossil record, something profound occurred. Silence reclaimed the forest. The swamps drained. The fires cooled. The air thinned. The sound of legs on moss was replaced by the crack of jaws, the hiss of breath, the first primitive growls of creatures with skeletons inside their flesh. The age of arachnids had ended. The age of vertebrates had begun. But endings in nature are illusions. What seems extinct often lingers in unexpected ways. Deep in the layers of rock, in the black imprints of Megarachne and Arthropods, the story of the giants still pulses faintly, like a heartbeat under stone, waiting for someone to listen. And if you listen closely enough, through the long hush of extinction, you can almost hear the exhale of a dying forest and the whisper of something immense that refuses to be forgotten. The fall of an empire is rarely sudden. It begins as a whisper, an imperceptible change in the rhythm of the world. The Carboniferous swamps, once so alive they seemed to breathe, began to quiet. The heavy air that had sustained titans turned thin and brittle. Fires that once roared across forests now flickered weakly, starved of fuel. The planet was exhaling its excess, reclaiming balance with an indifference that bordered on cruelty. Oxygen, the invisible architect of monstrous life, began to fade, and as it fell, so too did the creatures it had created. The collapse of the giants was not a cataclysmic event, but a slow suffocation. The once verdant wetlands dried, their peat bogs shrinking into shallow basins. The atmosphere thinned, forcing the great arthropods into smaller, less hospitable niches. Their vast bodies, once supported by the generous air pressure of abundance, became burdensome. Each breath demanded more effort. Each movement burned more energy. Evolution, merciless and pragmatic, began to favor the small, the adaptable, the hidden. The giants had ruled too long on borrowed time. Imagine the forests of that dying world. The air still hums, but faintly now, like a heartbeat fading in the distance. The colossal trees, their roots starved of moisture, collapse into the mire. Dragonflies with wingspans once broad enough to blot out the sun now drift weakly, their dominance over, and beneath the ferns, the last of the great arachnids retreats into burrows that grow shallower each year, seeking dampness where there is none. It waits for a prey that never comes, its senses dulled by hunger. Even the webs, those perfect architectures of death, begin to fail, torn apart by dry wind and time. It's tempting to see tragedy in their fall, but the earth doesn't mourn. It shifts, recalculates, evolves. The very conditions that doomed the arthropods paved the way for new life. As the Carboniferous ended and the Permian began, vertebrates inherited the throne. Amphibians grew tougher skins. Reptiles spread across the continents, claiming the sunlit world for their own. Teeth replaced fangs. Bones replaced armor. The slow patience of silk gave way to the cold precision of muscle and bone. The age of stillness was over. The age of pursuit had begun. But the collapse of the giants was not just a story of suffocation. It was one of fire. As oxygen levels fell, carbon piled high. The immense forests that had fed the Earth's atmosphere now became its tomb. Dead plant matter, unable to fully decay in the cooling swamps, layered upon itself for millennia. Pressure and time turned it to coal, the very substance that would one day fuel another age of giants, the industrial kind. The earth buried its memories deep, pressing them into black stone, sealing the past beneath future fire. And yet, even in their extinction, the ancient arachnids left fingerprints on evolution. They had mastered something no vertebrate ever would, the art of the still kill. Their design was perfect, a body built for balance, a nervous system tuned to the subtlest tremor, a strategy that turned patience into a weapon. These traits survived long after the bodies that carried them perished. Modern spiders inherited the code, distilled through epochs, stripped of scale but not of mastery. In a sense, the giants never truly died. They simply became more efficient, more precise. A world reborn in drought and dust. The vast wetlands now cracked and pale beneath a shrinking sky. And yet, if you knelt close, brushing aside the brittle moss, you might still find silk. Thin, invisible threads clinging to stone, impossible remnants of a forgotten empire. empire, a fragment of web fossilized in amber, a microscopic trace of the hunters that once ruled a forest that could burn with its own breath. The record remains not just in fossils, but in the creatures that survive. Every orb weaver, every tarantula, every flicker of movement across your floor in the night. They are echoes, each one carrying the DNA of giants. There's a certain poetry in extinction, a lesson written not in words, but in silence. When the great arachnids vanished, the earth did not pause. Evolution did not lament their passing. Instead, it absorbed their story, transcribed their strength into smaller, sharper forms. Their fall was not failure, but metamorphosis on a planetary scale. The web stretched thinner, but it held. And yet, deep within that transformation lies unease. Because extinction is not always final. The Earth is vast, its histories layered in secrecy. Caves, ocean trenches, pockets of forest untouched for millions of years. These are the last sanctuaries of the forgotten. In such places, life can hide from the world's awareness, evolving in darkness while memory fades above. What if, in some corner of the earth, an echo of that ancient empire still twitches? A descendant, isolated and unchanged, adapted to airless caverns or deep peat beneath the jungle floor. The thought lingers because it feels possible, because nature does not erase what works. She only hides it until the world is ready again. The collapse of the giants was, in truth, only one of many endings, and every ending, given enough time, circles back to the beginning. The spiders survived the burn. Our own apocalypse, reborn in miniature, refined into elegance. They became artists of fear, sculptors of precision, survivors of every extinction that followed, and perhaps in the way they move now, slow, deliberate, eternal, we still glimpse the memory of their ancient grandeur. In the silence that followed the fall, the earth cooled, the night returned, the forests thinned, but the instinct that once ruled the Carboniferous swamps did not vanish. It whispered forward into every web, every sting, every shadowed motion on the wall. And if extinction is simply nature's way of pausing between verses, then perhaps the song of the giants has not ended. It has only gone quiet, waiting for its next refrain. The air grows darker, the wind slows. Somewhere in the void between time and instinct, silk trembles once more, and from that silence, from extinction itself, memory begins to crawl back into light. There is a strange kind of immortality woven into silk. It does not decay like bone or crumble like stone. It endures, delicate, invisible, but unbroken. In that resilience lies the final truth of the giants who once ruled the world. Though their bodies turned to dust, their art survived. The web, the hunt, the quiet intelligence that listens to the rhythm of the earth. In every thread stretched across a doorway, in every trembling pattern cast in dew at dawn, the past still breathes. To watch a spider spin its web is to watch time itself remember. Each movement is ancient choreography, passed down through a billion silent generations. It begins with a single thread, anchored to nothing, suspended between worlds. Then comes the spiral, outward, inward, symmetrical and purposeful. The geometry is perfect because it has been perfected for over 300 million years. The web is not a trap. It is memory made visible. Modern spiders are small, almost humble compared to their ancestors, yet in their stillness, they command the same quiet authority. The world has changed around them. Forests burned, oceans shifted, mountains rose and fell, but the spider has not needed to reinvent itself. Its patience remains unmatched, its strategy unbroken. It does not chase, it waits. It does not roar, it whispers. The web is its weapon, but also its scripture. A record of survival written in silk. Each strand hums with the same physics that once held the wings of dragonflies as wide as crows. The same vibrations that warned the giants of movement now pulse through their descendants' creations, tiny, tense universes suspended in air. The silk itself is one of nature's most extraordinary materials, stronger than steel by weight, flexible beyond measure, capable of surviving heat, cold, rain, and time. It is both armor and art, and yet what it represents is far far greater than its form. It is persistence. When you look closely at a spider's web in sunlight, you can see it shimmer like breath on glass. Each strand reflects light like memory reflecting through time. You're not just seeing an insect's handiwork, you're seeing the continuation of an empire that never fully fell. A structure that first appeared when forests could ignite with a single spark, now strung between your window panes. We fear spiders, perhaps, because they are too quiet, because in their stillness we sense something alien, something ancient. But that unease is the echo of recognition. Our fear is an inheritance. We remember them. Somewhere deep in our subconscious, buried under millions of years of evolution, the human mind retains the memory of those vast arachnid hunters, the ones that dominated before our ancestors had language or fire. We flinch not at the creature, but at the shadow of its lies respect. The spider does not compete with us, nor does it seek dominion. It exists in parallel, a reminder of what endures when everything else collapses. While we build and burn, conquer and consume, the spider waits, watching, rebuilding its world in silence each night. In that patience lies a lesson. The giants may have fallen, but their spirit, the art of stillness, the mastery of survival, remains untouched. If you walk into a forest at night when the moon hangs low and the air is heavy with dew, stop and listen. There is sound beneath the silence, the faint vibration of silk, the shifting of hidden legs, the quiet pulse of something older than time. You are standing within a cathedral built from memory. Each web is an altar to endurance, a map of persistence drawn across millennia. And perhaps, just perhaps, somewhere in the depths of that web, something larger stirs, a lineage that never shrank, a shadow that never truly vanished, hidden in the depths of some unlit cave or a forgotten rainforest hollow. A descendant might still linger, silent, patient, waiting for the air to grow rich again. The world has a way of remembering its monsters. Extinction is never truly the end. It is a pause between breaths, a chapter folded within another. The giants of silk may have vanished from the swamps of the Carboniferous, but their legacy outlasted continents. They did not vanish from the earth. They adapted, reduced, redefined, and in doing so they achieved what every species secretly dreams of: permanence. When the sun rises and catches the dew on a spider's web, it burns gold for an instant, as if the past itself is reflecting. In that shimmer lies everything they were, everything they became, and everything we still fear to remember. The giants are gone, but their song continues, faint and endless, woven into the wind. And as the world changes once more, as the air thickens, the forests return, and the earth grows heavy with breath, who can say what sleeps, waiting for another rain? The web trembles, the silence deepens, the memory of silk endures. But what if the age of giants never ended, only changed its shape? In the jungles of South America, whispers speak of a predator so vast it devours birds whole, a descendant of the ancient empire, hidden in plain sight. In the next episode, the deep-sea spider larger than a human torso, we descend into the dark heart of survival, where the line between myth and biology begins to blur.